Hello again, and welcome back. Today I wish to speak to you about something I feel is very important: division. Now, division has existed as long as people have. However, it has been weaponized and is being used against us. From the time we are born, division exists in our lives: socioeconomic division, cultural division, even religious division, which seems like an oxymoron to me. From a young age, we learn to trust people that look, think, and act like us, that believe what we believe, and that move in the same circles as us. This is not a novel concept. However, in this current time, and at least for most of my life, division has been weaponized. It has become a tool of a small group of people and is being used to keep us distracted and focused in the wrong direction. The us against them scenario keeps us at each other's throats and blind to what is really happening. It's time to look past these differences and find the commonalities. It's time to stop competing and start cooperating. A while back, I wrote a story that I think highlights this topic, and I would like to share it with you now. Once there were two people that went hiking/camping in the mountains. They did not go together, but they were in the same area. These two people seemed very different on the surface. They both had planned to be gone for several days. One was a white male. He was brought up in a very conservative Christian home. He had very strong conservative, some might even say fundamentalist Christian ideas about life. He was a successful businessman who was involved in local politics. He always voted the conservative line and felt that their position was the best one. He didn't understand why anyone would choose anything different. He only listened to conservative network news and primarily read books and magazines articles that mirrored his beliefs. He wasn't racist per se, but his friends were all mostly the same as he was, and he never really considered life from anyone else's perspective. The other person was a gay black female. She was brought up in a very liberal household, studied art in school, didn't subscribe to any particular religion, mostly believed in nature. She also had a very strong ideas about life and people. She believed that women had a right to decide whether to get an abortion or not, and thought that guns should be outlawed. She too only read information that supported her point of view, and when she did vote, it was usually against someone versus for any particular candidate. She got involved in local protests when she felt they were for a good cause, and she couldn't understand why big corporations were allowed to have so much power. She had experienced a degree of persecution in her life, both as a black female and as a gay person. As such, she was guarded around people that were not in her orbit. They both had spent time hiking in the mountains and were both acquainted with the ins and outs of camping and living in the wilderness. For the man, it was a kind of an adventure, a test of his manhood, if you will. The woman saw it more as a way to connect with nature and recharge after the hustle and bustle of life would catch up to her. They both had planned to be gone for several days. What they didn't plan on was a freak fall storm and 24 inches of snow. After the third day, not long before it was time to start making their way back out of the forest, and during the night while they slept, a storm came in fast and heavy. They each had a tent, of course, but were not expecting to wake up to several inches of snow and what amounted to blizzard-like conditions. Neither had thought to bring a radio and so were unaware of the coming storm. They were also unaware of their respective campsites were only about a quarter mile from each other. When it became apparent they would not be getting out that day, they each decided to collect as much firewood as they could and get it in a place where it would stay dry. It was during this task that they ran into each other. Both were surprised, to say the least. Neither had realized that anyone else was around. After the initial shock wore off, they introduced themselves and inquired if the other person was okay. Unlike life in the city, when people encounter each other in the wilderness, there is an unwritten rule of etiquette that you always help anyone that needs it. After all, there might not be anyone else around that can. And in the present circumstances of heavy snowstorm, well, it's always good to have help. Now, of course, there was suspicion and guardedness on both sides. After all, they were very different at first glance. The woman felt a bit of fear being so far from anywhere and being somewhat vulnerable. The man, while not afraid of the woman on a physical level, nonetheless felt threatened somehow in a way he didn't really understand consciously. After discussing their situation for a time, they decided to pool their dwindling resources and ride out the storm. It was determined that the woman had found a more sheltered area to make her camp, and so they packed up the man's stuff and gathered as much wood as they could carry and made their way back to her site. As it turns out, there was a natural rock overhang that created a great sheltered spot for a fire as well as a place to sit and not get snowed on. So once they got the man's tent set up, they decided to gather more wood and talk about their options. The woman had brought along an excess of food but had not wanted to carry extra water due to the weight. The man, conversely, had brought an abundance of water but had underestimated how much food he would eat. They knew that walking out during the storm was not a good plan, and so it was decided to just stay put and see what happened. As it turned out, they would be there for 2 more days. Since there was nothing to do really beyond keeping a fire going and starting a new one, eating and so forth, they had a lot of time to kill. They decided to tell each other about their lives. The man started and explained how he had been brought up to believe certain things about life and how his life had pretty much gone down that familiar path. Nothing in his experience had really challenged those beliefs, and so he never really questioned them. He explained that while he had nothing against people of color, he never really got to know any personally. Also, his religion frowned on the idea of being gay, but he never really thought about it much. He was not gay, and so it was really a non-issue to him. He always had considered abortion to be a sin because the church said so, but he was never in a position where he had to even be a part of a decision about whether or not to choose that. Again, a non-issue. He related why he thought so-and-so was a better candidate and how this person's ideas supported the man's business. The woman listened, and while she disagreed with most of his ideas/choices, she had an inkling of why he had chosen them and how he ended up believing what he believed. By the end of this story, she realized that she no longer was afraid of this strange man she had encountered, and that he had lived his life based on an example he was taught, followed, and never had a compelling reason to question. The woman's story, of course, was quite a bit different. Her experience growing up was not filled with religion and money. She had even experienced a sexual assault at the age of 15 from a relative. This had resulted in an unwanted pregnancy, and after much consideration, she had opted to have an abortion. Where he had been taught that it was important to be successful, which in his world meant having money, she had been more drawn to the beauty in nature, in art, in music. To her, the idea of working 80 hours a week in a stuffy office and enduring the stress this created both at work and at home was an anathema to what she perceived as happiness. This was somewhat puzzling to him, as he had never really thought about it that way. To him, it was just how life worked. If you wanted to be happy, then you had to make enough money to be free to do the things you wanted to do and buy the things to be happy about. The woman believed that if people would think the way that she did and her friends, then everyone could be happy. That if people would stop judging her for who she was and her choices in life, then she would be free to be happy. They continued to trade stories throughout the day about things that had happened in their lives that reinforced their beliefs. As each one told a new tale of experience, the other one would frown inwardly and wonder if the things they had always thought were true were merely one side of the coin, so to speak. They were even able to share some funny stories of awkward experiences they had each endured and laughed with each other over the embarrassment they had felt at the time. The next day brought continuing snow and more difficulty finding wood that was dry enough to burn. The food was getting a bit slim, but they still had some water, and of course, the snow could always be melted. It turned out to be another day of hunkering around the fire and talking about their lives. At one point, the woman walked into the forest to answer the call of nature and came face to face with a mountain lion. Normally, these cats avoid humans and would stay hunkered down in a storm like this, but there it was. She froze and did not know what to do for a moment. This was completely unexpected. The cat, for its part, seemed startled by the human. Where normally it would have heard or smelled her coming, it had also been caught off guard due to the storm. Just as she thought the cat might attack, a gunshot rang out and startled her silly. The cat ran off, and the woman turned to see the man standing there with a handgun, steam wafting from the end. He asked her if she was okay, and they made their way back to the shelter. She exclaimed to him that she had no idea that he had a firearm with him, and reiterated how much she detested the things. But under the circumstances, it was fortunate that he did. The rest of that day was uneventful, and when it got to be late, the The conversation was exhausted. They retired to their respective tents and fell asleep. When they woke up the next day, they were both astounded to realize that not only were they each in their original camping area, but that there was absolutely no snow anywhere. A quick check confirmed that only one night had passed, not several, and they each realized that this had been an elaborate dream. It took a long time for them to assimilate what they had experienced because it had seemed so real. Throughout the course of the morning, they each packed up their stuff, getting ready to head back, while trying to make sense of what they had experienced. By the time the man made it back to his car, he had really started to question everything he had known. Could it be possible that things are not as I was led to believe? The woman was having the same thoughts as she entered the parking area and pulled up short when she saw a man loading his car. He did not look exactly like the man in the dream, but this was way too much to be coincidence. The man also was surprised to see a black woman leaving the forest as if on cue. This is life, people. We grow up in our own little bubble of experience, and we often don't understand or even consider that other people have experienced something completely different. We may feel like it's us against them, but in reality, that is just conditioning from a system that thrives on people at odds, keeping people at odds. This is a time in history when it's important to look past these differences, to see the commonalities that we all have, to let down our guards, if even a bit, and consider a different perspective. It's time to stop fighting over choices other people make and realize that this is just the tapestry of life. We all came here to experience things not available to us in the non-physical. Why condemn the very people that offer us the opportunity to do just that? I believe that if I raise my vibration and keep it there, that I will ascend to a place where the differences matter not, and no one is threatened to the point where they have to lash out or take something away from someone else. Stop buying into all the fear and hype about differences and us against them. They are us, so who is them anyway?